Hello and welcome. My name's Steve Atkins and I'm the Program Director for the Silicon Trust. And what you're watching is an interview that we did for the Silicon Trust Media Studios. Now these online videos that we're doing, these online interviews, these are a response to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that we've been putting up with for what seems to be quite a while now. It's also a response to the work from home scenario that a lot of us find ourselves operating under. It's desk to desk, but it's still face to face until that time we can finally meet again. Today I am speaking with Bernd Zwattendorfer from Infineon Technologies, and we'll be talking about an article he's just written called "The Reason Why Secure Biometric Systems Still Require Hardware-Based Security." So Bernd, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Let's start off with an easy question. In your recent article, you claim that biometric systems are in evidence now all around us. Can you expand on that claim for people that perhaps don't recognize this statement at all?
Of course. There are a lot of examples in the field where we actually already use biometrics. The most prominent example is the e-passport, the electronic passport, where facial image and fingerprints are stored on a secure chip. And when we travel across borders, being it at a normal border gate or an electronic e-gate, we show our electronic passport and our facial image is read out together with the fingerprints and verified that's then really me in that case. Another example would be biometrics to be used in the enterprise context. A lot of companies already use biometrics to protect their assets, being them either physical or digital. For protecting physical assets or special high security areas, we see fingerprint sensors at doors or facial image sensors at doors and gates. And for protecting digital assets, we see fingerprint sensors connected to laptops to really protect the online data. And finally, we see a lot of biometric sensors already deployed in the consumer space. We see fingerprint sensors integrated in our personal computers, in the laptops, in smartphones, tablets. But we also see sensors to be used to capture and record facial images for identification and authentication of the individual person.
And what application areas do you think biometrics are going to take a far bigger role in?
That's not an easy question, because I think we will see biometrics in many areas, so not in one particular areas. I mean, I provided an example before that we see biometrics in the ID sector, but we also see biometrics in the payment sector, where we have fingerprint sensors on the card verifying the person. We see biometrics in the physical access sector. So there are many applications out there. In fact, we will see biometrics everywhere where we want to substitute knowledge-based factors such as passwords or PIN. So something what you need to remember with something you have, such as your fingerprint or your facial image. So everywhere where you want to get rid of passwords, we will see biometrics to be a useful and user-friendly authentication mechanism compared to username and passwords.
Can you explain why hardware security is so important in the area of biometric security, especially when it comes to data storage?
Yes, of course. Biometrics itself is a very sensitive data, yeah? So it needs especially be protected. Biometrics is bound to the person. That's in fact the main feature of biometrics, but also the biggest threat. At the moment we use many knowledge-based authentication mechanisms such as username and passwords, but if you lose or forget your passwords, you simply recover it and reset it. Typically, you get an email to your email account, you reset a password, and that's it. For biometrics, it's not that easy. Yeah. So once you lose your facial image or your fingerprint, then it's gone, and that's the biggest problem here. So you need to properly protect it, and the best way, of course, to protect biometrics is to use secure hardware, tamper-resistant hardware, a security chip, being it on a USB token or a smart card, and that's really important. Once you lose your biometric, it's gone, and this is what you should avoid, and hence protect it properly with some kind of tamper-resistant hardware.
Now, I know that Bernd, that you've been very involved in FIDO. Can you explain to our viewers what FIDO is and what role it plays within the biometric industry?
FIDO is an emerging industry standard developed by the FIDO Alliance. Infineon was one of the founding members many years ago. The main objective of FIDO is making online authentication more secure. In fact, they have two objectives. The first one is making traditional username password mechanisms more secure by adding a second factor, being it a hardware token or a smart card. And the second thing or second objective is to substitute knowledge-based factors such as a password, for instance, with some factor, something you have or something you are, so with biometrics. So these are the two main objectives of FIDO. The nice thing with FIDO is that you directly authenticate using your biometrics to the authenticator, and then the authentication result is transferred to the server. So if you have, for instance, a fingerprint sensor on a smart card or a USB token, you directly authenticate to the token, and then if the result is successful, the access to the website is granted. The biggest advantage here is that no biometric data is ever transferred to a server, so it's stored and kept on the authenticator itself and can be stored in some preferably secure hardware chip, for instance.
And finally, Bernd, what I'd like to do is ask you, what is your opinion of the impact of COVID-19 had on biometric verification in terms of attended or unattended biometric verification units?
Very good question. I think COVID-19 will also influence the biometric sector, especially for the biometrics capturing mechanisms. COVID-19 is influencing our daily lives, so we need to practice physical or social distancing, but we also need to avoid to touch common surfaces, and that's what we probably will see and need to avoid. Maybe also avoid touching common fingerprint sensors, for instance, and that's why I see different trends here for the future, especially for this biometric template capture mechanisms. The first thing probably we will see is distance capturing, so really capturing, for instance, your facial image from a certain distance. Or we could also see fingerprint sensors which are touchless, so you don't need to put your finger on the sensor itself, but just keep your hands and your fingers in a certain distance, and it's anyhow possible to generate a fingerprint template out of that. And the second possibility I see is that we see sensors, for instance fingerprint sensors, which are directly bound to the person itself. A typical example would be really the fingerprint sensor on the card, so on a smart card, which is only touched by a certain person.
Okay, Bernd. That's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
That was Bernd Zwattendorfer from Infineon Technologies. I'm Steve Atkins from the Silicon Trust, and I thank you for watching. Goodbye.